Our guest is Arad Kaplan at Princeton University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've been teaching there a couple of years, and I remember it fondly. Aaron, you do work in a number of areas, but one of your interests is the IDF and the history of the IDF. Israel is a unique society these days, and it's because it's under existential threat, nothing Canada or the United States knows, and the Army is central to that. Can you describe that centrality?
The Army is central, because the country needs an army to protect itself. It faces real dangers, so the Army is a necessity. But I think it has a role beyond just providing security for the country, and since its creation in 1948, it's been a very important social institution as well as a defense institution, and in many ways it was the great equalizer of Israeli society. The fact that every citizen, or at least every Jewish citizen, had to serve in the military made it kind of the ultimate melting pot of Israeli society for decades. And all Israelis from all strands, from all backgrounds, from all countries had to go through the experience of serving in the military. So it's been the one institution that has defined the state really since its creation. But also the evolution of the state is reflected in the changes that the IDF has undergone over the years.
Well, I want to get to that in a minute. Going back to this equalizing role, I'd like to tell you, my granddaughter just finished her officer training, her officer service in the Army, and she was in charge of, in the end, she started at the platoon level and then became the officer in charge of this educational division that takes dropouts into it. And her job was essentially to save these dropouts and drug people who have been in prison to make them citizens. Yeah. And so the Army serves a role as a rehabilitation agency, which was surprising to me and largely successful.
I mean, it is. And for years, without serving in the military, your options were rather limited in Israel. For a while, it was even difficult to get a driver's license without prior service in the military. Many public jobs and government jobs were simply closed off for you if you didn't serve in the military. So
but you said it's changed.
It has
changed.
That
that changed?
It changed dramatically, yes.
How has it changed?
It changed that nowadays in contemporary Israel, service in the military is not a requirement for advancing in life or in career. And in fact, there's a growing segment of young Israelis. Some of them come from affluent, educated families who choose not to serve.
You can choose not to serve these days?
You basically, nowadays, the IDF will not fight with you if you don't show an eagerness to serve.
I see.
It costs them too much to put you through 3 years of service. So if you're not motivated enough, they would allow you to pursue other opportunities. And it's becoming much easier to get out of service.
What effect does that have on the culture of the whole, ethos of when everybody isn't, well, not everybody is required anyway, the Palestinians aren't required to serve, but what's the change in ethos then?
I think that there's a tremendous change because, as I said before, the IDF in many ways reflected Israeli society. So if you looked at the internal hierarchy of the IDF, the elite units, then historically, in the 1950s and 1960s, most of the pilots and fighters came from kibbutzim or from the affluent neighborhoods of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Nowadays, they come to come from other sectors of the population. For example, West Bank settlers.
Well, increasing religious.
Yes, and
number of officers.
Absolutely. So they're attaining much more prominent roles. But also immigrants from Russia and Ethiopia use the military as a way to advance in Israeli society, whereas the more traditional elites of Israeli society no longer, I think, view the military as a necessary step in advancing their career goals.
Well, the kibbutzim have faded from the central life of leadership in the community. But isn't there a new movement taking place? These people go into a year pre-training before they even join the Army and create this kind of ethos among themselves to really effectively train the new leadership. Is that not the case?
There is more and more kids coming from the more affluent neighborhoods choose to do kind of national service before their military service, where they do and go do a social work in different communities, right, in development towns, in troubled areas. But here again, it seems to me that there's a shift from the centrality of the military experience into other aspects. And my sense with speaking with some of them is that when they're thinking about the future, their primary focus is how it will advance their own career,
Really?
or their own lives, or their own interests, what they can find in it, what might fulfill them, rather than thinking about the national collective
Really?
goals.
My interpretation is exactly the opposite. I'll tell you my experience. I spent Yom Kippur with them, last Yom Kippur, and interviewed a number of them because I was really curious about this movement creating new values. I could tell a story about my shock at hear a discussion between a leftist and a rightist. It's totally civil. It was such a shock for me. Yeah. But that I got a sense that they were teaching a common set of new values of civility, of listening, of saying that Israel, no matter what your ideology is, won. And so I didn't get a sense of self-advancement, but of a new collective value set being taught. Maybe we interviewed different people.
Maybe, but maybe these are the objectives of the program. But in talking about the people who go into the program.
No, that's who I was talking.
Yes.
I didn't talk about,
Yeah.
that's not from interviewing
Yes.
leaders, that was interviewing people. So
Yes.
I haven't yet interviewed the leaders. We're going to do that. But in any case, but the IDF plays another role, of course. It's the political role it trains. The political leader still continues to do that till today. Mm-hmm. So it's unique I think, in any Western country, I'd say. Would you say? I don't know if the Army playing a role.
It is absolutely unique. I mean, the last time in the West that the military played such a role in creating the political elite was the Second World War. So we had de Gaulle, who had his military experience taking on the leadership of France, Eisenhower, who became president of the United States. But this was really the last kind of wave of military leaders. I mean, Colin Powell was potentially the next president of the United States. But American presidents of recent vintage don't have much of a military career.
Well, Clinton didn't even serve, and Obama, you got people who the Army isn't part of their background. And even Bush skipped it.
Yes, by most accounts, yes.
That's right. So, and maybe by funny means, but anyway.
So in this regard, Israel is quite unique, yes.
But is there a different change in the sense, there was Lebanon war left a bad legacy, bad reputation for the IDF. Did it recover through the Gaza war in sense of discipline, sense of significance, and the respect it held?
It recovered, I think, in the recent war from a professional point of view.
That's what
there was much less criticism of the operations of the military. But again, it's a very different military than what it was 20 years ago, because now it's exposed to so much criticism. And
internationally.
Internationally, but also from within. And it airs out in the media. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, there might have been terrible mistakes, but nobody knew about it. It was kept internally. Now everything is immediately discussed in the media, on the internet, in blogs. So there's much greater scrutiny of what is happening in the IDF, which perhaps is very good. Maybe it'll help it become more professional and more efficient on this regard. But it's changing the dynamics. In many ways, it was a holy cow for decades.
So it's lost its halo?
To a large degree, yes. I think it's treated much more as a professional entity within the broader society.
And what's the effect of that on Israel generally? If this central institution loses its halo?
My take is my overall take on Israeli society is that it has undergone a process of privatization on a variety of levels. I mean, Israel used to have a elaborate social network. It no longer has it. Much of it has been privatized. Collectivism in many areas has given way to new forms of individualism. I mean, again, look at the IDF. In 20, 30 years ago, the idea was to become a pilot or a commando fighter. Now the elite unit for the affluent Israelis is an intelligence unit that has produced many of the high-tech entrepreneurs of Israel. So this is another path that you can use your military service.
I'm way back there for the Golani Brigade and all that. Well, with that, we'll have to say thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
guest is Donna Holbrook. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you, Howard.
Now, you've had a long connection as a Christian with the Jewish community. Just explain to the audience what that is.
My connection with the Jewish community wasn't birthed until I went to Israel, and that was about 16 years ago. And once you visit Israel, you come back wanting more, and the closest link to Israel is the Jewish community here. So that is how that all started.
And this involvement with this show, you've been on the show as a guest, and you're involved as the director with the Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. What role do you see this show playing, both for the Jewish community and for Israel and for the Christian community?
I see our Jewish world as being a very critical link, actually, to the Canada-Israel relation and to the faith groups, the Christian and Jewish in particular. When you come back from Israel, I was hungry for anything Jewish, and where do you go? And so I went into the Jewish community. I went to hear the different speakers in the synagogues, and I read the papers, and I tuned into CTS, and I saw your show. And that became a regular program for me. I watched it faithfully every Sunday. And I think it helps people who are here to learn about Israel, whether they go there or not. If you've been there, you want more. If you haven't been there, you need to learn more about Israel. And the program is so diverse about culture and agriculture and technology and medical advances and just fun things that you can do there. The wineries and the food expositions that you can go on. There's much to enjoy and learn about Israel. And I think as a Christian Canadian, we enjoy those types of shared values, the sports, and our young people need to know that the kids in Israel are just like them, just in a different environment.
And you're just about to go back to Israel again.
I am.
And you're going to have a good trip. And you have the Feast of the Tabernacles there.
That's right.
And you attract a big Christian community from all over the world for that. We're going to have a special show on you. Because
That would be great.
We have to do that because I think the Christian support for Israel is so significant now, and it's important to understand that. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I promise you we'll have the special show, and we'll feature what you do and your activities.
Thank you, Howard. Glad to be here.